Matt's live from the Mello Center now, the state-of-the-art practice facility where the Orange basketball team calls home. Matt?
Well, Megan, it's worth noting that the Mello Center really was built in the wake of the '03 championship, and that's how far back these violations go. On the conference call with the NCAA today, I was listening in on their conference chairman who was talking about the investigation and noted that these violations were considered to be the highest level with aggravated circumstances. They took this very seriously, and they said if the same problems had surfaced today, Coach Boeheim could have been facing a one-year suspension for an entire season. But still, the penalties are severe. 9 games for Coach Jim Boeheim at the start of the conference season, so that'll likely be after the new year next year. He's never been suspended before. The university is standing by the longtime coach, though, stating it did not feel the program lacked institutional control, and the coach should be held responsible. The NCAA sees that all differently.
Ultimately, we have a situation where the desire to achieve success on the basketball court overrides academic integrity. It really demonstrated clearly misplaced priorities.
Now, Sports Director Nico Tamurian joins us now. And Nico, before we get to more with you, we want to look back to 2003, right. Really the pinnacle of Jim Boeheim's career, and certainly for this community as a community of Orange fans. The greatest moment of his career really could have been in jeopardy with this. That victory in New Orleans has not been harmed, though, by the extensive sanctions. Fans will really never forget that team. It featured Carmelo Anthony, that the center here is named after, Jerry McNamara, Hakeem Warwick, Wes Dwayne, all the guys that we all remember so fondly. The violations did go back to 2001, but it turns out that the NCAA and the university in their discussions agreed that 2004 was going to be the benchmark where the sanctions could go back to because they felt like it was just more than 10 years was too far for them to have any kind of punishment. So that makes sense considering how long this has drawn out.
I'll tell you, a lot of Orange fans tonight breathing a sigh of relief that the statute of limitations went to May of 2003. That championship forever protected. That's a huge thing. Imagine what that would have done to the psyche of our town.
Yeah, that would have been really a severe price to pay. Obviously, that part of a negotiated arrangement here tonight.
No question. And, you know, going back to Coach Boeheim, I mean, really, he's the guy that's singled out in this report. There's penalties, as like we mentioned, the suspension for him, 9 games. And not just 9 early games, but you know, these are ACC conference games against top-flight opponents, but there's still milestones for Jim Boeheim in jeopardy. The university self-imposing a vacation of 24 victories, so Boeheim already down to 942 wins as we speak. That number could go up because the NCAA wants to meet in the next 45 days to knock that down even further. Wins could be vacated even from 2013. How'd that impact the 2013 Final Four run? That remains to be seen as well. So the immediate impact comes from that suspension for 9 games to Coach Boeheim. The scholarship reduction, that'll be huge in the next 4 to 5 years to come, and even further than that as those players get older. But Coach's milestones and his quest for 1,000 wins certainly in jeopardy. And if you think about it, I mean, right now it's at 942. We're getting hypothetical here, but Coach, a couple of years staying on could hit that mark. But if the NCAA marks that down, say another 50, even 100 wins, then obviously that mark would be well out of reach for Coach.
One thing that's really fascinating about this whole story is Syracuse alone in having violations like this across the country?
I don't think so.
Or are they more widespread than maybe what we might realize?
You know, a lot of national pundits calling to mind North Carolina, and their penalties widely seen as much more severe than this. That's an ongoing NCAA investigation. If Syracuse was hit this hard, you wonder how North Carolina will be, but that's another conversation for another day.
You know, we talked about the fans. Our Alex Ursula met up with some of the fans today. He's at Tully's tonight, getting reaction from people who really live and die with the Orange this time of year. Alex.
Well, Matt, here inside Tully's, it's very apparent when you look around at the walls at all the pictures and memorabilia from Syracuse University Athletics, just how much the Orange really means to this community here as they live with the team during the wins and they tend to die with them also during the losses. And this punishment imposed by the NCAA is one which many SU diehards have been anticipating, well, for quite some time now, leaving many fans wondering what else will happen to their team after the self-imposed postseason ban, mainly asking, will the Orange miss miss out on any other future tournaments in the near future. But now these fans have answers to their questions, and many tell me that these are answers which hit the team and then in turn the fans very hard. The suspension of Coach Boeheim, the loss of scholarships for the team, and the vacation of wins from past season comes as a complete shock to many fans. But for others, this was to be expected after a years-long investigation into Syracuse University by the NCAA. The team will not have to miss any additional postseason games after this season. The one thing all fans do agree on is the silver lining in the announcement, which has everyone reacting.
I just think that it's not fair, and somebody needs to investigate how they make all the decisions that they come up with.
It's a lot to take in, but if everything is what they say it is, then it should be what he's getting.
I was actually disgusted because, you know, the guy's been here his whole life and done a lot for Syracuse. He can't follow the kids 24/7.
Coming up on NBC3 News at 6 o'clock, we're going to bring you some of the interviews I had with fans here and talking about the long-term future of the program here in Syracuse. We're going to be talking about upcoming decisions by recruits. For now, we're live here inside Tully's. I'm Alex Versilla. Matt, back to you.
Now, as for Coach Boeheim and the Orange team, right now they're in the air in their chartered flight down to North Carolina, getting ready for that last game of the season against North Carolina State tomorrow at noon. Megan?
People will be watching that game closely, Matt, and certainly listening and waiting for any reaction from Coach Boeheim. We'll see you tonight at 6.
Well, Megan, after the verdict came down in court, the district attorney, Bill Fitzpatrick, talked about 3 issues that he thought were critical to getting this conviction. First, the time of death that was established for Leslie Newlander and how that didn't jive with what Dr. Newlander said had happened that day. Also, those 911 tapes where we hear Jenna Newlander in a very emotional state, first seeing that blood splattered throughout the house and realizing that her mother was either seriously injured or perhaps already killed. And also, finally, that the district attorney had a hard time finding any forensic pathologist who would say that this actually looked like an accident as opposed to some type of homicide. Now, after court let out, the attorney for the defense, Ed Mencken, talked briefly with reporters.
Bob Newlander is the most honorable person I have ever met. This case has been a travesty from start to finish. It is not finished. That's all I have to say.
Sarah Beth Ackerman joins me now. She's been covering the trial since it started. And Sarah Beth, you were in the room today. We were not allowed to have cameras inside during this trial by order of the judge after objections from the defense. But what was that moment like when this verdict was read?
Well, the jury came in and they said they had reached a verdict. Everything was silence in there until they said guilty. Wailing, screaming, gasping, crying all came from the Newlander family. They were visibly struggling.
What about Dr. Newlander? Were you able to see him at that time?
Yes, I did glance over to Dr. Newlander. He was very emotionless, not really showing that he seemed to be upset when they handcuffed him. The same thing. Very quiet, very, almost like he was just taking it all in.
And what about his daughter specifically as he's being taken out of the room? What did she do?
Jenna was hysterical. She was so upset. She actually stood up, was calling, "Daddy, I love you. You're innocent. I'll get you out of jail."
A lot of security in the room?
Yes, there was tons of security.
And a packed, full house, certainly, for that today. Sarah Beth, we appreciate all the coverage you've had. We're going to have more from Sarah Beth coming up tonight on NBC3 News at 6. But Megan, a very emotional day here, but also a lot of analysis about what elements of this trial led the jury, after careful consideration and parts of 4 days of deliberations, to reach this verdict of guilty of killing his wife. Dr. Newlander right now is housed in the county jail right next to where we're standing.
Well, Matt, I think it is worth pointing out this was a very difficult task for the jury. They sat through many days of testimony, and then they were tasked with deciding whether or not this man was guilty. For them, I would imagine it was a very emotional time as well.
I'm sure that it was, and a very weighty task to take on. Keep in mind that this was a crime that was difficult to go from point A to point B. There was no clear explanation of what might have started the dispute between the couple, what led to this violent reaction, exactly what time it happened, was there a murder weapon. All those elements were not presented specifically because the district attorney didn't have that evidence, but he did have a lot of other evidence, and that was enough to convince the jury.
Matt Mulcahy live downtown for us tonight. We'll see you again in just a bit.
Matt, good evening.
Well, Megan, it's just been a memorable ride here in Washington. Just about 10 minutes ago from the very balcony where we're standing now, we watched the presidential motorcade head back down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House after what's being considered a successful evening for the President of the United States, giving this State of the Union address and what will be his penultimate address. Only one more left next year after his 2 terms in office. So he's in the final 2 years, and that was part of the theme he struck tonight, that it was time for him to get a couple more things done, to work with this Republican-controlled Senate and House now and try to accomplish, for example, something for the middle class, to give a tax credit to the middle class, or to work on better broadband access for small towns and rural areas, or also this idea of working on global affairs, concern about Afghanistan, Iraq, ISIS, and the growing threat from ISIS in the Middle East were part of the agenda and the tone that he talked about today. And by the end of the speech, though, he was talking a bit on a bipartisan basis, hoping that he could listen to some Republican ideas, work together, and see if something can get done with the Democrat controlling the White House and, of course, the Republicans controlling Congress. Well, joining me now is freshman Congressman John Katko, who was here for his first State of the Union message. And Congressman, what was it like to be under that dome tonight in this really special occasion?
Well, Matt, it was a high honor, of course. It's my first time being at a State of the Union, and the sense of history that you feel when you're in that room and then the sense of duty that comes along with it really struck home to me. So it was really an honor.
What is that moment like when the president enters the room? He's announced, the applause breaks out. It seems to be such a great moment of national unity, at least at that instant.
It is. I mean, you're honoring the office. I mean, you can disagree with the man, but you're honoring the office. And what struck me about it, he's just a normal human being just like you and I, and he's in an extraordinary situation. So that kind of struck me too, seeing him in person instead of just seeing this figure on TV all the time or in the news. So it was it's humbling, it was an honor, and the sense of history was great.
What about the politics of tonight? You know, laced within his message, certainly there's some inspiration, some motivation, but then he talked about trying to reach across the aisle and try to accomplish some things. Do you think that can happen this year?
Well, listen, I'm very hopeful of that, and I came to Congress to try and do just that, and that's why I sat over with Democrats, because I wanted Democrats to maybe learn from me and what my views are, and I'm going to learn from them. But the bottom line is, if his actions are as clear as his words, we're going to have a good Congress. If they're not, we're going to struggle, but we're going to find out.
Yeah, and that's still something that needs to be tested, doesn't
it? Exactly.
Congressman Katko, congratulations on being here for your first State of the Union. You have at least one more.
I got at least one more. That's right.
And already time we talked earlier today, where you have to start thinking about re-election, believe it or not.
Then let's just enjoy tonight.
You got
first.
some work
How's
to be
that?
done, and we got a great view here tonight.
Yes, we do. Not bad at all.
Megan, back to you.
Oh, just a remarkable night. Matt, thanks so much.